And just like that, another New York Fashion Week has come and gone. The jam-packed week, or really 5-day period if you look closely, just wrapped with designers sharing their fall-winter collections for 2026. With nearly 100 presentations and runway shows on the official CFDA calendar, plus tons of off-schedule presentations, events, and parties, there is a lot to cover. I attended New York Fashion Week, and I feel like I still missed a lot of what went down. So today's episode is going to be a New York Fashion Week recap. We are going to talk through some of the most notable runway shows and presentations, including some designers who made their debuts this season. We're also going to chat through some emerging trends, both that we saw on the runways and also in the streets. We'll talk through some of the top trends, both from the runways and out on the streets, because street style is just as much a part of the Fashion Week conversation as is what's on the runway. And of course, we'll chat through a rundown of the fabulous parties that people posted about on Instagram, including a couple that I attended and some that I did not, but definitely wish I had been invited to. And if you are watching today's episode on YouTube, I finally feel like I've got my setup down. So I recently switched over to a new setup where I am sitting in this gorgeous lounge chair. I've got my microphone here. I finally took out the little velvet pieces that came with my microphone and wrapped them around the cord. So I think that setup looks a lot cleaner. I also ordered yet another cord for my laptop, so now I am able to stream in 4K. We're feeling good over here. I truly do think that with the podcast, I'm getting 1% better each and every time I do it. And hopefully that comes through when you guys watch. So before we get into the Fashion Week recap, let's do a little create and consume. If you're new here, this is a segment we do at the top of every episode where I share what I'm creating and consuming and where I invite you to tell me what you are creating and consuming. Because in this era of digital content, we're always doing one or the other. In terms of what I've been creating this past week, obviously lots of Fashion Week content, but I wanted to shout out a reel that I was able to create backstage at Love Shack Fancy. I had access to talk to Brent Lawler, who was the hair lead for the show. And he very kindly took a few minutes out of his extremely busy morning to chat with me. So that short form video is live on all my platforms now. I will add a link to it in the show notes if you'd like to see our interview. Going backstage at shows is always so fun for me. I've done it a couple times now, ever since I also started sharing more beauty content in addition to my fashion content. And I feel like it really adds an extra layer of context to the presentations. And it's always so fun to chat with the experts backstage and hear about their vision for the beauty and the glam, because I do think that ties so much into the styling for these shows. So I got to speak with Brent, and I also got to speak with Shy, who was the lead for makeup with Tarte Cosmetics. And I wanted today's episode to be more of like a true industry recap. So if you want to see my personal Fashion Week experience, that vlog will be coming to my YouTube channel shortly if it's not up by the time this episode is. And then as far as what I've been consuming this week, consuming can be anything from watching to eating to buying. This week, I want to feature a product that I recently bought myself, and it's pretty rare that I buy makeup, but I've been watching Miss Shelby Ann on TikTok. If you guys don't know her, I will link her profile in the show notes. And she has got me really into drugstore makeup lately. So I made a couple purchases, and one that's been a standout for me is the Maybelline Super Stay Skin Tint. I personally love a good skin tint, from Glossier to Fenty Beauty to Milk Makeup. I feel like I've truly tried them all, but I don't think I've tried one yet at the drugstore that has impressed me as much as this one has. It's really lightweight, but also buildable. I love the finish of it. It's kind of like a medium satin finish, and it layers really nicely with other products. My one complaint about it is I don't love the applicator. It's almost like a dropper applicator like you would have in a serum, but with the consistency of the skin tint, I don't feel like that is actually the best to get the product out of the bottle. I just wish it was a typical pump. So packaging, maybe like a C, but product, I would give an A. And don't forget to leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, or reach out on any of our social media platforms at Create and Consume Pod to let us know what you are in fact creating and consuming, because you know I love hearing from you guys. And with that taken care of, let's get into the topic of today's episode, which, like I said, is going to be a New York Fashion Week recap from February 2026. So, the month that I'm currently in as I'm recording. And with that out of the way, let's get into the topic of today's episode, which is, of course, a Fashion Week recap. So I'm recapping the week of February, it was like February 11th through February 16th of 2026, where designers were showing their fall winter collections. If you are new to the concept of Fashion Week, we usually look at a season ahead. So even though we are about to enter spring, designers are showing the fall collections. That's actually kind of a leftover piece of Fashion Week, and maybe one of the things that's slightly broken about Fashion Week, but that would be a topic for another episode, because Fashion Week used to be a time where mainly buyers and magazine editors would attend. Buyers would be looking to see which collections they want to purchase and fill their stores with, whether it's a department store or a boutique, for the upcoming season, and magazine editors, back in the glory days of print, would work several months ahead. So they would come to see collections in February that would then be in later issues, but they would need that lead time to plan ahead, the same way buyers would need those lead times to place orders. And in terms of who attends Fashion Week today, buyers do still attend. There are still editors, obviously, who attend, but who probably now have different goals and different coverage angles that they do for Fashion Week compared to what Fashion Week used to represent. And then obviously, of course, influencers and content creators, and also even just friends of the designer or models or a number of other people who are connected through 1 or 2 degrees of separation, I would say. Now, if you are interested in attending Fashion Week, by the way, I did a whole episode about this last year. I believe it's episode 36 of the podcast. I will link it in the show notes, where I talk more about pitching and how you can actually attend shows. So if you're thinking about attending in September, definitely go save that episode and come back to it later, because I really do break it down in extreme detail. For this year's Fashion Week, there were roughly 98 total events on the official CFDA schedule. CFDA is the Council of Fashion Designers of America. That is the website that I always go to when I am looking to see who is showing this season and who I am planning to pitch when I go to attend shows to cover them for my social media platforms. And I kind of noticed this year the schedule was pretty front loaded, because even though Fashion Week technically ran through yesterday, which was February 16th, I'm recording this on Tuesday the 17th, yesterday was technically a holiday. So because of President's Day, I feel like a lot of the other shows were front loaded. Also, it fell on Valentine's Day, which it usually does too. So maybe some shows were passed over for that. For me, February Fashion Week is a little less predictable. I don't necessarily always know who to expect to see or how the shows are going to go. We also don't always know what the weather's going to be. And if you live in the tri-state area, I apologize for telling you what you already know, but it's been horribly freezing here for a couple of weeks now. We got a really big snowstorm at the start of February, and the snow will not melt. I think this week we might start to see a little bit of reprieve from that, and hopefully some rain and the snowbanks melting. But it makes for, interesting questions, such as, which shoes am I supposed to wear? If I ask my Uber to drop me off at the exact location I need to go, will I need to scale a snowbank to get to my destination? And I'll also add, I feel like Fashion Week felt very localized this year, just in the sense that I sometimes have friends from out of state who travel in for Fashion Week, which kudos to anyone who does that. It is chaotic and expensive to do that, but I felt like pretty much everyone who I saw this year, with like 1 or 2 exceptions, already lives in New York. I feel like with the snow drama and how cold it is, it probably was not a super appealing time for anyone from out of state to come on in. So it felt like just a little close-knit New York event, which was also nice. Okay, let's talk through some brands that made their debut at Fashion Week. Got my notes right here. The first one, and the one that I was probably most excited to see, was Cult Gaia. And this is just, I feel like, a long-time cult favorite brand, to use their own name to reference them. And this was their first runway presentation at New York Fashion Week. And I don't think I realized that they hadn't shown previously. I think I kind of think of Cult Gaia existing in a similar world to Staud and Cinq. But according to everything I read, this was their first runway show. So I saw the designer. There was also a really cute video of her at the end of the show with her kid coming up to her and hugging her. Obviously, that was such a sweet moment that found its way to my Instagram feed a couple of times throughout the week. The next debut was Seven for All Mankind. And when I say this is such a mainstay brand that's been around for a long time, I remember when I first was able to like drive when I first got my license, I would go to the Anthropology near where I grew up and just walk around and kind of like look at everything, do a lot of window shopping. And Seven for All Mankind was one of the denim brands that I clocked immediately back then as being like, oh, this is a really nice like pair of jeans. This is someone who knows what they're doing is making these clothes. So it's really cool to see. This was the first time on the New York Fashion Week calendar for them. And they were also debuting under new creative direction of Nicola Brognano. I mean, the show looked wonderful. Definitely wanted to make sure I mentioned that one. Now, the next one confused me for a second because I was like, I've been to this Fashion Week presentation before, but this is kind of one of the tricks of Fashion Week. And to go into a little bit of advice for just a second, if anyone is thinking about attending Fashion Week, I would say obviously go look at the CFDA fashion calendar. I'll put an exact link to what I'm talking about in the show notes just in case you want to go click over and see what I'm talking about. It will list brands who have submitted to them and said, hey, we're on the schedule for this week. I'm actually not sure if that's a thing designers have to pay for or not. It very well could be. I mean, it probably brings the most visibility and awareness if you do choose to put yourself on the official schedule. But there are so many brands who show off schedule too, especially if it is one of their first times doing it. Maybe they're not ready for that type of visibility yet. Maybe they're testing things on a smaller scale. Or again, it could cost like $1,000 to submit yourself to that schedule. I have no idea what the situation is. So anyway, all of that to say, Caroline Zimbalist made her on-schedule debut because I had actually previously attended a Caroline Zimbalist presentation. And when I looked further into this, I learned that she'd been showing off schedule since 2024, but this was the first time that it was like an official part of the CFDA calendar. And I would say this year, I have like a whole crazy spreadsheet of New York Fashion Week pitch contacts and all of these various things that I like to use to keep track of what shows I'm attending each season and who I've reached out to. I want to say that I had maybe like 25 to 30 contacts that I pitched who were on the official Fashion Week schedule. But then there were probably another 50 who I just sent emails to, not even really knowing if they were showing or not. Just because sometimes you never know. Just because someone's not on the official CFDA calendar doesn't mean that they're not doing something for Fashion Week. So I would always rather ask and have the brand come back and say, hey, we're not showing this season, and have me look maybe dumb for 1 second versus not asking and then completely missing out on the opportunity. So just a little insider insight on the pitching process there. But again, if you want an in-depth explainer on how to do all of that, I have the episode linked in the show notes. Okay, another designer, Contessa Mills, who debuted this season. I didn't realize this is actually so cool that all of her collections are inspired by a different card from the tarot deck. And I don't think I know of any other designer who has such a specific focus and vision for their brand that's conceptual. I know a lot of brands obviously have certain focuses, like Seven for All Mankind. There's going to be a lot of denim in there. Other designers are known for using certain textiles, like Chanel tweed is probably the best example I could come up with off the top of my head. The fact that all of her collections are inspired by this same united concept, I think is so interesting. So that's something new I learned about Contessa Mills. I didn't realize that before. And this season, her collection was focused on the Queen of Cups tarot card. Doing a very quick Google search for the Queen of Cups right now on thetarotguide.com. The Queen of Cups can indicate you may be more sensitive than you let on to the outside world. The Queen of Cups represents a mature female or feminine person who is kind, caring, and supportive. The Queen of Cups is a sentimental, sensitive soul and a good listener. That's today's unplanned tarot lesson for you. Another designer who made their New York Fashion Week debut is VJ Floresca, and VJ recently won a season of Project Runway, which was super exciting. And for her debut, she shared a lot of like architectural silhouettes, which I believe she was known for. I didn't actually get to watch her season of Project Runway yet. Would I still watch knowing how it ends? Maybe, potentially. I mean, Project Runway is one of my all-time favorite reality shows, but I thought that was really cool, and she's also the first transgender winner of Project Runway. And there were more to name too: Akai, Lorena Papenko, and Show Pony among them who made debuts this week, but if we were to name them all, we would probably be here for a long, long time. Let's move on and chat about some runway trends spotted for fall/winter 2026. Now, when I used to work at Nylon and Jay Erico, the fashion director, would like assemble us all before we went out to our various Fashion Week shows, the thing that he would always say is three's a trend. So meaning if you see something 3 times repeated on the runway for various designers, that makes it a trend. So I spent a little bit of time on Vogue Runway, combing through all of the different runway photos and also obviously thinking about the shows that I was able to attend this season to put together a little list of trends to keep an eye out for when it comes to fall winter 2026. First, we have exaggerated shoulders as seen at Tory Burch, Carolina Herrera, and Colleen Estrada. I wish I had like a cute name for this one, but I just wrote down bright red as seen at Proenza, Schouler, Coach, and Savon. Sometimes I think a little bit too much about things like this. I mean, is a color specifically a trend on its own? Maybe not. But for this specific trend, I'm talking kind of like head to toe looks. I mean, at Savon, there was this incredible woman who, like, I want to be her when I grow up. She walked in with a red jacket and pants, and she had this like beautiful trail of fabric tailing behind her. She had a really structured hat on, and it was a full body look. Same at Proenza Schouler. There was one specific, I believe it was a dress on the runway that was like a head to toe look. So I'm not just saying like, oh, I saw red a little bit here. Like there was a red sweater in this collection, a red sweater in that collection. I think I am more looking at it as a monochrome statement moment. Okay, next we had lovely gloves as seen at Michael Kors, Calvin Klein, and Carolina Herrera. I personally am on the hunt for a fun pair of leather gloves right now. I mean, hopefully winter is almost on its way out, but definitely something to think about and continue styling for next season as well. Honestly, I feel like one big hesitation I have with just wearing gloves out and about, and this is so stupid, is just that it's very impractical with the phone. But I have tried some touchscreen gloves in the past, just like the basic knit ones you get from Amazon with touch technology. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Maybe it would give me a reason to like be less addicted to my phone. That's always, something that I'm interested in learning more about. Okay, I thought this one was interesting. I did notice a few trench coats that were leather, but instead of being like a black leather or even like a camel color, they were all this beautiful deep purple, almost like an eggplant shade. The 3 designers that I saw do this were Tanya Taylor, Legence, and Tory Burch. And what's so funny? I actually rented a trench coat just like this from Newly last month. It ended up being pretty wrinkled and also thinner than I was expecting it to be, so I didn't end up wearing it out. But I kind of like that I psychically thought about that somehow in my Newly from last month, and it was really cool to see it repeated on the runway. So maybe I'll have to see if I revisit that trend this coming fall. 80s power suits and silhouettes as seen at Diotima, Snowshoe Gow, and Jacquemus. Jacquemus is one that I completely missed this season, like didn't realize they were showing. Sometimes they show in Paris, sometimes they show here, I think. So definitely was not aware of that until I went on Vogue Runway and was like, oh, missed you guys. What were you doing here? Okay, I'm kind of obsessed with this next one. I'm calling it billowy pants, and this was seen on runways at Ulla Johnson, Cinq, and Kalmayer. This to me feels like such a great solution for fall dressing, and the best way I can explain it is most of these were designed in either like a silk or crepe kind of fabric, and they just moved so beautifully. In some cases, they actually did have like a cinch at the ankles that made them look and feel more billowy. In other cases, they were like a wide leg design. It just seemed like such a sleek way to pull an outfit together. Like you could wear it with a sweater, you could wear it with a more structured blouse, you could wear it with a t-shirt. Like you could literally wear it and style it in so many different ways. And I feel like you could obviously wear them just on their own in the early fall months. And then as you go into winter, I also feel like that's something you could slip a pair of like fleece line tights underneath. It just makes you think beyond the possibilities. Like that's what I love about Fashion Week is it gets me out of my own head and my own closet, because at this point in winter I'm usually so sick of wearing the same 8 things over and over again that I just know are going to keep me warm. And Fashion Week is always that reminder to me that like, no, you can dress fabulous literally anytime you want, any time of the year. There's no one who's telling you not to. I just always find it really inspiring. And then the last trend that I wrote down was these really cool embroidered tapestry-esque pieces as seen at L'Agence, Ralph Lauren, and Veronica Beard. I'm kind of wondering if this is a nod to the current needlepoint craze in some ways, like these embroidered tapestry-like designs and fabrics. I especially love a tapestry-styled jacket. It kind of reminds me me of like early 2010s Free People designs too, because I used to work there in retail in college, and I feel like that was a recurring theme of pieces there. And I love seeing trends from even like 10 or 15 years ago kind of coming back around and making a comeback. So those were some of the runway trends that I noticed. Now let's talk about a couple of street style trends that were spotted. So I feel like number one was I saw a lot of people wearing pillbox hats, kind of like 50s vibes, a la I just think of Midge Maisel in so many different scenes of that show. Not entirely sure if I have the right head shape for that. I've never tried a pillbox hat, but I mean, I'm kind of wondering if I should at some point. I mean, if you're going for that true ladylike vibe, I feel like that is one of those accessories that just instantly sets the tone for the rest of the look, especially since it is so close to your face and it's one of the first things that you see. So thought that was cute. Another big one was zebra print. And it wasn't really a print per se, but I do have this beaded zebra purse that I got gifted last month from DSW that I brought with me to my Friday presentations. I definitely posted that outfit somewhere. I'll link it in the show notes in case you want to see it and check out the purse. The purse kind of reminds me of the Staud bags or even like the Anthropologie beaded bags, but for honestly like a fraction of the price. And I just love that we're still in like a zebra print, animal print state of mind. I mean, to go back to the collections for a minute, one presentation that I attended last week was Norma Kamali, and there was so much leopard print integrated throughout her collection, from jackets to accessories like scarves and hats. I'm just here for being a little bit extra. That's what animal print kind of represents to me. And I think it's fun because it's a pattern, but in most cases, it's still a neutral. So I feel like that's a really easy one to kind of tap into, especially if you've been wanting to spice things up, but you don't necessarily want to wear like bold, flashy colors all the time. So thought that one was really fun. Another one was barrel bags or barrel purses. So these are very like cylindrical style purses and bags, which I feel like in some ways can hold a lot of things, but maybe not things that you actually need to be bringing with you to shows. I mean, for me, that's like my vlog camera, an extra clip-on light, a handheld tripod. The list goes on and on. So I'm off today bag lady with like a tote bag during Fashion Week. But really what I should do is look into getting a bigger purse that can actually hold like my laptop and things like that. And that still looks cute. I can't even remember when we switched over to just like teeny tiny crossbody bags. It must have been somewhere in the late 2010s. And I guess I never switched back around to get a bigger purse. I do have my eye on the Coach Brooklyn bags, specifically the brown ones, so we'll see. Maybe I'll treat myself to one of those later this year. The next street style trend that I was seeing a lot of is fringe skirts, and I actually started noticing this after I went to the Sept runway show because I sat down next to a creator named Rose. I obviously just met her at Fashion Week and started following her. I'm going to link her profile down below, and specifically the outfit that she wore to the show, because her skirt, it was just like mesmerizing. So I feel like there's so many different varieties of fringe. Hers was very thin, almost like stringy fringe of the skirt. And then I also did see a couple of street style photographers who posted looks that they shot throughout the week sharing like thicker fringe, almost like in a leather or different texture. I'm just like scrolling through Rose's Instagram photos now, and I have to like gas her up for a second because actually this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. It looks like it's a dress. Oh, she says comment fringe, and I'll send you a link to my look. Fringe. Oh my god, wait, it is actually a skirt. That's honestly one of the best inventions ever. The comment the word and they'll send you the link. The only thing that actually would be easier is if Instagram figured out how to do shopping on app, as it should have done in like 2014, honestly. Like, why is Instagram so behind on that? TikTok is literally running them out of business on that front when you think about TikTok shop. Oh my god, it's so cute. It's from the Camilla Coelho collection at Revolve. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. Okay, well, I'm not thinking about buying that. Another one is colorful tights. And actually, speaking of the head-to-toe red looks that I mentioned in the runway trends section, someone said to me on Friday, because I had my red turtleneck and red boots, and then I had like black tights, a black skirt, and my brown jacket. Someone said to me like, oh my god, if you had red tights right now. And that just unlocked something for me. I was like, you know what? Yes, honestly. So I feel like we should bring back colorful tights. I feel like this was something that really was popular in like the Tumblr era of fashion. I have memories of wearing colorful tights in like the early 2010s, and I'm here to bring them back and make it fun. And I'm just like, yes, I'm here for colorful tights. My friend Caroline Vazana, who is quite literally a fashion icon, she had some great Fashion Week coverage. I can link her in the show notes as well. She is so good at wearing like a colorful, playful piece like that, but still bringing an air, is that the right word, of sophistication to the look. Like it doesn't look toddlerish or juvenile. She still always manages to style it in a way. Probably gonna have to browse her page for a bit more inspiration there. I also feel like everyone was in cropped faux fur jackets. I don't know if that speaks to just how cold it was last week and how everyone needed those extra layers, or if that's something we will kind of continue to see going into next season. I mean, I did definitely see some fur jackets at Norma Kamali and also at Snowshoe Gal. And there were honestly lots more street style trends too, but my friend Karia, who's a street style photographer, did a couple of trend breakdowns over on her Instagram. So I'm going to put those in the show notes so you guys can go check them out. Wow, sounds like the show notes are going to be stacked for today's episode. And also, if you guys don't know, I do a blog post for every episode as well. So if you're ever listening and I mention something and you're like, wait, what were we talking about? What did she say in that episode? And you go to search on the blog for that episode, that should have even more details, and any links and stuff that I mention will be there. So that is always a resource for you guys as well, in case the show notes are not enough. Okay, let's talk through a few notable shows from this season. One big one was Michael Kors had his, get this, 45-year anniversary runway show, and the theme was New York chic. I was trying to learn a little bit more about this show. I saw he did an interview with Daily Front Row, but to be very honest, it was a very, very light interview. It was like one word questions, one word answers. I'm not sure if it was meant to be rapid fire, but I really didn't learn anything about the show from that. So I kind of just relied on Instagram. It seemed like there were a lot of industry insiders present. One piece of intel that I did glean from the Daily Front Row article was they asked him who has attended the most of his shows in 45 years, and he did say Anna Wintour, so that's a flex. And speaking of anniversaries, Sept celebrated 10 years this month with their New York Fashion Week show, which, as I mentioned, I actually got to attend in person. It was so much fun to be there and to see the designer come out at the end. They also had a giant cake to represent like a birthday, essentially. So there was a large cake that they wheeled out at the very end of the runway show, and it was just such a sweet celebration to see. That's one of those brands that like truly every single look that came down the runway, I could picture myself wearing to one place or another. And by the way, Sept, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I did take Spanish in high school, not French, so my apologies to any French-speaking listeners out there. That means 5 to 7. And the whole ethos and idea behind the collection is like what the New York woman is doing between the hours of 5 and 7. Basically, like what's she doing after work? What's she doing before bed? In that fun little 2-hour time window where it just feels like there's a world of possibility. It feels very Sex and the City vibes. And if you guys are listening to this episode and are not super familiar with the fashion industry, sometimes brand founders will exit their brands for one reason or another or go design for different houses. So that's the case with Proenza Schouler. The original design team, Jack and Lazaro, went on to work on a different project. So Rachel Scott was brought in to be the lead designer for this brand. And actually, Rachel Scott had a busy fashion week because she also has her own brand, Diotima, and I don't know how she juggled creating presentations for both, or what the plan is kind of moving forward from that. But anyway, the Vogue runway recap that shared photos and images from the Proenza Schouler show and also shared a quick recap. It was talking about how her expertise from her brand Diotima came into play at Proenza Schouler this season. Apparently she has a really deep background in crochet, and that was really shown in a couple of like knit dresses and things like that. Just her understanding of the craft of how things are made and also how they're going to look like draped on a woman's body. If you haven't seen this collection, definitely go look it up. There were a lot of cape-like inspired tops. There were a lot of structured jackets, I would say, kind of in the same way that Snowshoe Gal and other designers were leaning into 80s inspired silhouettes with like cinched waists, big shoulders. I thought that was really cool. This was another collection where I was like, I will take one of everything, please. So I really enjoyed that. Okay, another show that I actually got to attend was the Savan Runway show. So this was held at the Georgia Room, which is inside the Freehand Hotel in the Gramercy Park area of the city. And can I just say, as someone who's attended many seasons of New York Fashion Week, usually, there are very few designers who are willing to break the mold in terms of what a typical runway show looks like. You know, it is interesting how I felt like the Savan runway show was so refreshing, and we could do a whole separate episode about the lack of diversity in the fashion industry and very specifically the lack of diversity during New York Fashion Week. And maybe we will one day, but it is crazy what a breath of fresh air it was to see a true representation across the board of all different body types, all different genders, races. It really did just make it feel more relatable, which I know is kind of antithetical to the idea of Fashion Week, which is historically very exclusive, hard to get into for a certain set of eyes only. But I fucking loved it. I thought it was awesome to truly see a designer who's willing to design for all different types of bodies, to see plus size, disabled, below average height bodies all on the runway. It gave it character, it added interest, which is sad to say that just like being generally inclusive was what added interest, but it really did. And I really, just looking at so many photos from across the week, did not necessarily see that much representation otherwise. In some ways, it seems designers have made improvement in terms of racial diversity, but body diversity remains a big left out part of the Fashion Week conversation and as a reflection of the fashion conversation in general, which is still so bizarre to me when you look at the number of, we'll just say Americans for now, because we're talking about New York Fashion Week, people who are beyond standard sizing and who are in the plus size category. Again, clearly we could rant about this at another time too, but anyway, I just really appreciated the representation in this show and also the concept and like the theater of it. This was a performance as much as it was a runway show. The way the pieces were styled made them feel borderline costumey in the situation of the actual runway show, like in the context of that space and with the whole presentation. But if you were to remove them, do slightly different styling, you know, messier hair, maybe toss off the pillbox hat, you could easily see how they could translate to be very wearable everyday pieces. And that is what the ready-to-wear collections are really all about. So I really, really enjoyed that show. I also think the Georgia Room was such a great choice for venue for that runway show. And then Bronx and Banco actually shut down an entire city block for their runway show where the first model exited out of a taxi cab. I saw that all over my Instagram. I thought that was so fun. And I didn't attend Bronx and Banco this year, was not invited, but I did attend a previous season where they also did an outdoor runway show, but that was in September. Doing an outdoor show in February is pretty ambitious, so shout out to everyone who braved the cold to make that happen. Let's move on and chat about some designers who did not show a collection this fashion week. I wanted to specifically spotlight two who had pretty different reasons, too, for why they decided not to do a fashion week presentation. Number one is Rebecca Minkoff. I have attended a couple of Rebecca Minkoff Fashion Week events and presentations in the past. I saw a clip going around social media of her talking on the Fashion and Founders podcast where she said, we don't even really show at Fashion Week anymore. She was talking about how she feels like in order to do Fashion Week well, you need to spend a minimum of like $250,000. She was talking about the cost of venue, hiring models, photographers, makeup artists, all the different things. Not to mention for certain influencers or content creators, if you want this particular person to post about the show, do you have to pay them? What kind of coverage will be guaranteed? Like the number of questions that are up in the air and basically whether or not it's actually worth the money to show at Fashion Week, because it's incredibly expensive to fund a Fashion Week show. And she said that when they had done it in the past, they often had partners or sponsors who kind of underwrote the cost and helped in that way. She said, I couldn't add it all up and say, okay, that directly made money come back. So it's true that for some brands, Fashion Week may not be a very good return on your investment of money. And I feel like Fashion Week shows for designers really can encapsulate that like 15 minutes of fame vibe, whether they want it to or not, just because There is so much noise during the week. There's so much to cover. We're still going through this outline. There's still even more to talk about. So the question of whether or not it's worth it is one to consider, financially speaking. And then there's another designer who didn't think it was worth it in kind of a different way this year. So Daniel from Zero Waste Daniel, who I have known for, I want to say like 10 years at this point. He is truly wonderful. I have interviewed him for Nylon. I have gone to events of his in the past, obviously. And I just think he's a wonderful human. He posted a statement on his Instagram. I'm going to link it in the show notes so you can read the whole statement, basically talking about the current political climate, just a whole host of things that are going on right now that he feels are more important than Fashion Week. And he talks more about why he chose to kind of take a step back this season. He said, I didn't make a new collection for Fashion Week. Fashion Week has been powerful for my brand, but I don't want to take up space talking about things that matter less. The runway can hold real meaning, and I support every designer using it to speak out this season. Right now, what feels necessary is staying grounded, staying true to my values, and speaking clearly against bigotry, exclusion, and abuses of power. That's just a little sampling of his statement. Like I said, I will link the full thing in the show notes so you can go read it. And I think there's validity in this point of view as well. What does this all mean in the end if we're not allowed to, walk down the street in our own cities and feel safe? And while there is so much chaos going on in the world and in our country at the moment. So here we can see another side of a reason why a designer may choose to press pause, take some time, and not show at Fashion Week while there are other big pressing issues going on out in the world. Let's move on to chat through some influencer events and Fashion Week parties, which I think over the year have become more and more a part of the Fashion Week conversation. And even looking at my schedule this year, I had a mix of like brand events, a party here and there, appointments to see collections, backstage, and then some runway shows and presentations sprinkled in as well. Like compared to what the pie used to represent, which used to be basically all different runway shows and maybe a handful of presentations, Fashion Week now, for me at least, as like an independent, self-employed content creator, looks different, and there is more going on outside of the runway shows. So first I'll talk about the Fashion Week party that I attended to kick off the week, and then we'll go through some others that I read about. So the one that I went to was hosted by Marie Claire and Who What Wear, and it was for Loft's new denim brand Rivet. This party took place at Bowery Terrace. I was also able to bring a guest, so I brought my friend Taylor Morello, who is a fellow YouTuber and content creator, and it was a fun time. They were giving out jeans, they were doing custom embroidery, they had drinks. I didn't end up actually trying any of the drinks that night. I ended up just ordering a mocktail and basically chugging water because I knew that we still had a long week ahead. This party was super fun. It was from 6 to 9, so not too late. I actually knew a lot of people there, so it felt like a great chance to network, say hi to a bunch of people all at once, connect in real life. They also were giving out pizza, they gave away jeans, they did denim embroidery, and they gave everyone these little keychains that said, if lost, please return to New York, that are kind of modeled after the keys that they use at the Bowery Hotel where the event took place. I also got to meet Charity Lawson and her fiance Dotun, who I watched on season 20 of The Bachelor. No big deal, it's fine. It's fine, I'm fine. So that was a really fun time, and it was cool to see an email, just personally speaking for a second, that was like, hi, I'm from the influencer team at Marie Claire inviting you to this event, because I was a fashion closet intern at Marie Claire in 2014. So the fact that 12 years later, I'm getting invited to an event of theirs as an influencer would have made 20-year-old Austen so excited. Are you kidding? Couple of other parties that made headlines this week. Manolo Blahnik hosted an intimate dinner on Tuesday to kick off New York Fashion Week. It was held at the Gold Room at the New York Edition. Guests sipped on Manolo margaritas and played billiards before sitting down to an intimate dinner. Louis Vuitton hosted a cocktail party celebrating the debut of their Express bag held at Obvio, a cocktail bar in Nomad. This one sounded fun. J. Crew threw a roll neck remix party in honor of an item that they've been selling in their store since the 1980s. So basically what they did for this was they had 5 different independent New York designers come in and put their own take on the classic J. Crew roll neck sweater. I thought this was so smart. I can't believe I didn't hear about this until I intentionally went looking to see what happened during New York Fashion Week. So J. Crew partnered with 5 brands: Gucci NYC, Colleen Estrada, Ecoslada, Patrick Taylor, and Tanner Fletcher, all of whom put their own unique spin on this garment for a new capsule collection. I think this is a great fucking idea. I can't believe I didn't hear anything about this until I went to look it up. Hervé Leger celebrated 40 years and the launch of their anniversary capsule collection at Jean's Bar in the East Village. Influencers like Remy Bader and Amaya Espinal from Love Island were in attendance. Orium Collected hosted Orium After Dark at Maison Close in the city. Founder Castamico recently announced that the brand is pivoting away from their jewelry roots and is going to focus on fine leather goods. I was kind of surprised to hear this initially and a little sad about it. I'm actually wearing an Orium necklace right now, which I guess I can't link anymore because it's not available. But I do remember Cass even talking in like the early days about wanting to be a handbag designer. So it's interesting to see how the brand has shifted over time from starting out in jewelry, moving on to belts and starting to get into leather goods, and then now having their handbag line. And this evening debuted their spring summer 2026 collection. I did see some photos from the event, looked very cute. They had some alcohol sponsors. They had these little matchboxes that said table for 3, you, me, and my new bag. And a couple of influencers who I follow were there, such as Mary Lease, Danielle Carolyn, and Campbell Puckett, aka Pookie. And lastly, Like to Know It hosted their New York Fashion Week kickoff party. They had a wall of photos of what I assume were shoppable looks. They had little boxes of candy hearts as we were coming up on Valentine's Day, which was last Saturday. Looked like a fun time. I have been an LTK creator for a long time. I still use them very actively, link things on my LTK profile that you can shop if you are interested. I'm sure that you have to like drive a certain number of product sales or be a certain level of LTK creator to be invited to events like this, but I also think it would be cool to see LTK and even ShopMy, if they haven't done this already, branch out and try to invite creators of all sizes to their events so they can still meet the team, maybe learn some best practices. I don't think this party was like a learning best practices kind of event, by the way. It looked, like a party. But that's a free suggestion if anyone from any affiliate platform happens to be listening today. So that was your little news debrief on New York Fashion Week. And as someone who's been attending for 10 years, it's just interesting to see how the week continues to evolve over time. I mean, it feels like it's less about functionality and logistics. Like, okay, the buyers need to come see the collections by this date to place their orders by that date. And it's more a moment for a brand to make a splash through marketing and storytelling, which, as Rebecca Minkoff spoke about, sometimes is worth it and sometimes is not, just because it is a massive investment to be willing to make, but it can sometimes yield good results. I mean, obviously, any of the brands that I mentioned on this podcast are getting a little bit of airtime. Maybe I mentioned some names or some labels that you hadn't heard of previously or hadn't thought about in a little while and are going to go investigate further or shop their collections. And I am always happy to spotlight brands that I truly love and admire, especially brands like Zero Waste Daniel and Rebecca Minkoff, which I've been customers of myself and have supported for a long time. But it is really interesting to think about what is the value of Fashion Week for everybody. What is the value of Fashion Week for a magazine publisher? What about a designer? What about an influencer? Is it worth it for an out-of-town influencer to come in for New York Fashion Week, attend events, request to be dressed by brands, and so on and so forth? And I really ask these questions with no answer to give you at the moment. I mean, that could obviously be a whole other episode. There's always clearly more to chat about when it comes to me and fashion. But maybe just some food for thought as you go about the rest of your day, whether you're driving to work, whether you're folding laundry, whether you are going on a long walk around your neighborhood. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast channel if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a review if you are listening on Apple Podcasts. And let me know what your thoughts on this year's New York Fashion Week presentations were as well. And I will talk to you guys in the next episode.